You know the scene. It's 2 a.m. and there's a kid sitting at their desk with the same textbook open for the 5th time. Eyes burning, coffee gone cold, notebook imprint on their forearm from leaning over so long. And the worst part? They read the same sentence 3 times and it doesn't sink in, just doesn't stick. And they think to themselves, God, I must be stupid. I know this because I've watched it happen. I taught at Caltech for decades, and I saw brilliant young minds destroying themselves with the same broken methods. Over and over again, they'd study 8-9 hours a day, wake up early, stay up late, make beautiful color-coded notes, reread the material until they memorized which words appeared on which page. And you know what happened when exam day came? Nothing, complete blank. They'd look at the question and think, I've seen this before, but they couldn't use it. Like there was a glass wall between them and the knowledge. And the part that hurt me most wasn't the bad grades. It was what came after. I worked so hard. So the problem must be me, right? I'm slow. I don't have a good memory. I wasn't born for this. That destructive internal dialogue repeated every single day, until I started showing them something different. See, I never studied more than 2 hours a day in my life. Not at MIT, not at Princeton, not when I was working on the atomic bomb in my 20s. 2 hours. And I was grasping quantum mechanics, concepts that took others years to even scratch the surface of. How? I wasn't smarter than everyone else. I just knew how to actually learn. And here's what I realized that changed everything for my students. The problem was never their capacity. The problem was that nobody ever taught them what the hell learning actually means. School taught them to memorize, to repeat, to regurgitate. But real learning, that's not on the curriculum. And look, if you recognize this frustration, you need to know something. You're not alone. There's research showing that 73% of college students report studying more than 6 hours a day and feeling like they retain nothing. 73%. That's not coincidence. That's not you being stupid. That's a systemic method problem. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why you study so much and learn so little. And more importantly, how I hacked this decades ago. Let me tell you what you probably do when you study. You grab the material, read it once, don't quite get it, so you read it again and again. By the 4th time, you think, okay, this feels familiar now. I've seen this several times, so you feel confident. You walk into the exam thinking you know it, and you freeze. You know why this happens? Because your brain fooled you. There's something scientists call fluency illusion. It's when you confuse recognizing information with understanding information. The more you see a text, the more familiar it becomes. And your brain interprets familiarity as comprehension. It's a bug, not a feature. Your brain confuses. I've seen this before with I deeply understand this there. There was a study at UCLA by a guy named Robert Bjork. He took 2 groups of students. One group reread the material 4 times. The other group read it once and then tested themselves trying to recall it. Guess which group performed better on the final exam? The second one, by a margin of 30%. And here's the funny part. Guess which group felt more confident before the exam? The first one. The ones who reread felt super prepared. And they were the ones who failed the most. That's fluency illusion in action. You're not studying. You're deceiving yourself. It's like watching swimming tutorials on YouTube 10 times and then jumping in the pool thinking you're ready for the Olympics. You recognize the movements. You've seen it 1,000 times. It all seems super familiar. But when the water hits, you sink. Because seeing isn't doing, recognizing isn't understanding. And here's the problem. The entire school system was built on this illusion. You want to know how I know? Look at what they tell you to do. Read the chapter, reread the chapter, make notes. Reread the notes. Highlight the important parts. Reread the highlighted parts. It's an infinite cycle of rereading. And rereading doesn't build knowledge. Rereading builds familiarity. Now comes the part about notes. You probably love making notes, right? You take the book, copy the important information into a nice little notebook, maybe even with colored pens, and that gives you this wonderful feeling of productivity. You look at your 5 pages of notes and think, wow, I really worked hard today. But let me tell you something brutal. Copying information doesn't create deep neural connections. Your brain isn't an external hard drive. You don't save knowledge, you build knowledge. And building requires active effort, not passivity. There's neuroscience research showing that passive note-taking activates only 15% of the brain regions involved in deep learning. 15%, you know what activates the other 85%. Explaining, trying to retrieve information from memory, connecting new concepts with things you already know, applying them in different contexts. That's real cognitive work. Note-taking is just copying with different words. It's handwork, not mind work. And now the cherry on top, highlighting. Oh, does highlighting, the favorite technique of anyone who wants to look like they're studying. You grab the yellow marker, run it over the important parts, and done. Mission accomplished. Except not really. You can highlight an entire text without processing a single word. I know this because I watched my students do it. Their minds were thinking about what to eat for lunch while their hands were marking sentences on autopilot. And at the end, they'd look at the page covered in yellow and think, I studied so hard. It was theater. Productivity theater. You weren't studying. You were performing the act of studying to convince yourself you were working. All these techniques, rereading, note-taking, highlighting, they have something in common. They were designed to make you feel productive, not to make you learn, because real learning hurts. Real learning makes you freeze. Real learning makes you feel stupid in the process. And nobody likes feeling stupid. So we choose the path that makes us feel good. Reread one more time. Make one more set of notes. Highlight one more page. It's comfortable. It's safe. And it's completely useless. Now you might be thinking, okay, but how were you different? Let me tell you a real story that changed how I saw knowledge. When I was a kid, my father sold uniforms, but he had this natural scientific curiosity. One day he took me to the forest and pointed at a bird. My father said, "You see that bird over there? Do you know what that bird is called?" And I shook my head. My father continued, "That's a brown-throated thrush. In Italian, it's a chuto lapitida. In Portuguese, it's a bom de peda. In Chinese, it's a chung long ta." And then my father stopped and looked at me. Now you know the name of that bird in 4 different languages. And you know what you've learned about that bird? Absolutely nothing. That blew my mind, because that's exactly what school did. It taught you to name things. It taught you to label. It taught you to repeat definitions. But understanding the bird, understanding how it flies, why it sings, how it reproduces, what role it plays in the ecosystem, no, school never touched that. School taught you to name. I'm teaching you to understand. And the difference between those two things is enormous. There's a story I used to love telling my students. I was at Princeton, already a respected physicist, and I went to attend a biology lecture. The guy was up there presenting these super complex concepts. Everyone taking notes, everyone nodding like, yes, yes, makes total sense. And I raised my hand and asked, "Excuse me, but can you explain this in a simpler way?" And the presenter got kind of irritated and said, "Well, if you had read the basic texts, you would understand." And I responded, "I read the texts, and if I can't explain this simply, it's because I don't understand it. And if you can't explain it simply, maybe you don't understand it either." The room went silent. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Complexity often hides lack of comprehension. The more jargon you use, the more you hide behind technical terms and memorize definitions, the less you actually understand. I had a test for this. I called it my bullshit detector. The test was simple. You only truly understand something if you can explain it to an 8-year-old child. And look, this test is brutal because it exposes exactly where your gaps are. It's like an X-ray of your knowledge. Shows all the broken bones you were pretending didn't exist. Let me show you the difference between two brains. The traditional student's brain works like this: consumes information, feels familiarity after seeing it several times, thinks they know it, goes to the test and fails. It's a linear process that ends in frustration. Now the brain of someone who thinks like I taught them to think consumes information, tries to explain it out loud, freezes in the middle of explanation, identifies exactly where they froze, goes back specifically to that gap, rebuilds understanding from scratch, tries to explain again, succeeds. One is creating illusion of knowledge. The other is creating structure of knowledge. And there's science behind this. When you try to explain something, you activate working memory. You force your brain to synthesize, to connect, to create new neural pathways. When you simply reread, your brain is in passive mode. It's receiving information it's already seen, so it goes into autopilot. But when you try to explain, your brain has to work. It has to retrieve the information, organize it, transform it into language another person can understand. That's high-level cognitive work. There are studies on something called retrieval practice. Researchers discovered that the act of retrieving information from your memory is 300% more effective for long-term learning than passively reviewing information. 300%. It's not marginal. It's an absurd difference, and it makes complete sense. Think about it. Muscles grow through effort, not through rest. You don't get strong looking at dumbbells. You get strong lifting them. Brain is the same. Brain learns through retrieval, through effort, through attempting to explain, not through passive repetition. So how do you do this in practice? The method I used has 3 essential parts. First part, you choose a specific concept you want to understand. Not biology, not mathematics, a delimited concept. Photosynthesis, Newton's second law. Compound, interest, something you can name. Second part, you take a blank sheet of paper and try to explain that concept out loud, as if you were teaching it to an 8-year-old child. And this is important, out loud, not just thinking, speaking, because when you speak, you can't cheat. When you just think, your brain fills in the holes automatically. When you speak, the holes appear. Third part, and this is the most important, you pay attention to where you freeze. Where did you start using jargon? Where did you need to look at the material? Where did the explanation become confusing even to yourself? These freezes aren't failures. These freezes are the map. They show you exactly what you didn't understand. And then comes the extra part I always did. I went back specifically to those gaps and rebuilt understanding from zero. Didn't reread the entire chapter. Went straight to the point where I froze. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's take photosynthesis. You studied this in school, right? So try explaining it now, out loud. Photosynthesis is when the plant makes energy using sunlight and that chlorophyll thing, and releases oxygen. There you froze. You used vague terms like that thing. You skipped steps. You couldn't explain how light transforms into energy. Those are your gaps. Now you go back to the material, but not to reread everything. You go after specifically, how exactly does chlorophyll absorb light? What role does carbon dioxide play? How does water transform into oxygen? You rebuild piece by piece, and then you try again. Photosynthesis happens in the plant's chloroplasts. Chlorophyll absorbs photons from sunlight, mainly in the red and blue frequencies. This light energy breaks water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen is released into the air. Hydrogen is combined with carbon dioxide through a cycle called the Calvin cycle to produce glucose, which is the sugar the plant uses as energy. Look at the difference. Now you have structure. You can point to each step. You can draw this. You can answer questions about it. You understood. This is what I called thinking in first principles. I never accepted understanding something superficially. I always went back to the most basic foundation and built from the bottom up. There's an incredible story about this. When I was around 40 years old, I decided to learn biology from scratch. I knew nothing about biology. So I started asking questions that biologists thought were too obvious to answer. Like, but why does the cell do this? What's the evolutionary advantage? And how did this emerge? And you know what happened? I discovered that many of these obvious questions didn't have obvious answers. The biologists themselves didn't know how to explain because they had never thought about it. They had memorized. I had understood. So look where you are now. At the beginning of this talk, you were frustrated. Guilty, thinking the problem was you. Now you know the truth. The problem was never your intelligence. The problem was that they taught you methods that create illusion of knowledge instead of structure of knowledge. They taught you to reread, take notes, highlight. They taught you productivity theater. They taught you to name birds without understanding birds. But now you know the different path, the path I walked. And here's a truth I need you to understand completely. You don't have an intelligence problem. You have a strategy problem. And strategy can change. You can decide today to stop rereading and start explaining. You can decide right now to stop doing theater and start doing the real work. So let me give you a challenge. Take a concept you studied this week, anything. Now, grab a blank sheet of paper. Start your phone's timer and try to explain that concept out loud for 2 minutes, as if you were teaching it to a child. Go, do it now. Not tomorrow, not after this video, now. Pause here and do it. Did you do it? You froze, didn't you? I know you froze, because everyone freezes. I freeze. I froze throughout my entire career. The difference is that now you know that freezing isn't failure. Freezing is the process. It's in the freezing that you identify what you really need to learn. And this changes everything, because now you're no longer the student who memorizes. You're the student who understands. And the difference between those two identities is the difference between someone who spends their whole life feeling stupid and someone who masters any subject they decide to study. I used to say something that I think sums it all up. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. School gave you answers you memorized without questioning. I'm teaching you to ask the right questions. And right questions lead to real understanding. It's not faster, it's not easier, but it works. And in the end, that's the only thing that matters. So that's it. You don't need 8 hours of study. You need the right method. You don't need more colorful notes. You need to explain out loud until you freeze and rebuild the gaps. You don't need to reread for the 10th time. You need to test your knowledge by trying to teach. I wasn't a genius because I knew more. I was a genius because I understood better. And understanding better isn't a gift. It's a method.